So I want to welcome the cast and crew now that helped me put this together. First of all, our wonderful director, Malkia Stampley, is here. Also, there she is. Also, we have Chike Johnson, our cinematographer and editor. There's Chike. Hi, Chike. And of course, joining me tonight for our panel discussion and to put the film into context and perspective is Dr. John Ray Proctor, Assistant Professor of Theater at Tulane University, where he teaches African American theater history and theater for social justice. And he will also be a featured essayist in the forthcoming volume, Romeo and Juliet in Diaspora, Shakespeare Among the Arts and Translation. And Dr. Martine Kei Green-Rogers, Assistant Professor at SUNY New Paltz, where she teaches race and gender performance and multiple courses relating to underrepresented communities. Dr. Green-Rogers is also the past president of the Literary and Dramaturgs of the Americas. Welcome to you all. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I want to talk to Dr. Green-Rogers and Dr. Proctor first. Given the climate in this country right now, talk to us about the importance of artists of color, particularly African American artists, controlling their own narratives, and has the importance shifted with the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and George Floyd, among others, and with the advent of the coronavirus pandemic? Dr. Proctor, you first, please.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm here in New Orleans. I wanted to say that New Orleans is 67 to 69% African American, and I think about Chimamanda Adichie, who talked to us about the importance of telling your story, not telling the story from where it begins. When artists of color have the opportunity to tell a single story, it all has to do with where it starts and who gets to tell that story. For example, living here in America, if you were to tell the story of American history, and you start after when slavery began, you miss. Then you're able to tell stories about lazy Black people and Black people from a position of oppression. But if you go backwards and you understand the how and why people got to where they are, it's a very different story. So right now, as artists, when we are looking at who's creating and telling these stories, we really do have to look at giving voice to the Black artists who have something to say, and not the narrative that's being told about them. For example, when we looked at the killing of Tamir Rice or Trayvon Martin, and you have all those stories that begin with all the bad things that they might have done in their life, you're controlling how the media is controlling how that narrative gets told. They are shaping the way the public thinks about that individual. It has to do with the perspective from which the story is being told and what it is they're trying to sell. That's all I wanted to say. That's what to add.
Okay, great. Dr. Green-Rogers?
Thank you. I am actually coming to you from the Hudson Valley in New York, which is super white, and we're just going to leave it at that. And also the ancestral home of the Lenape, but that usually gets buried, unfortunately, in its overwhelming whiteness. But I don't have a whole lot to add, minus what Dr. Proctor said, except for the fact that I think our stories have always had the utmost of importance. And I think, unfortunately, the culture that we live in, which, to be completely honest, functions, at the behest of white supremacy, has never really allowed those stories to come out in a way that was fulfilling for us. It was always fulfilling for dominant culture. And so I think what has shifted isn't necessarily the import of our stories, the importance of our stories, but the fact that there seem to be more white people who are interested in listening now in a way that they had not before. And even then, I think there's still some nuance to that as to how much listening is actually happening. But I think there were more than there are before. So that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Thank you for that. So my second question is, we carry the trauma of slavery that our ancestors experienced in our DNA, while simultaneously experiencing our own PTSD from racial traumas and microaggressions. So talk to us about the cost and the toll that sharing our stories, what is the toll that it exacts on artists of color, physically, psychically, and how do we continue to do our jobs as artists and still protect ourselves?
So I think I'll address that. As actors, we are taught to access our vulnerability and our sensitivity. It exists just underneath our skin, and we're taught to be sensitive to the world around us. And when we are honest and when we are forthright and when we share our pain and trauma, that's amazing. But when what we get back is we don't care, when what we get back from white communities is and we don't care, because we're outside of the narrative of angry and black. When we have feelings and we say this hurts us, and what we get back is we don't care because it supports white supremacist ideological structures to make us the victim. Sorry, to make us the aggressor, to make us that scary person. Every story's got to have a bad guy, and oftentimes in the stories that we're told in American history, we are the bad guy in those stories. So that's when what we get back after telling our stories is we don't care. We become calloused and we want to stop telling our stories. But I don't think we are given that liberty. Martine?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the only thing that I would add to that is that in general, I think the toll on us psychically is only at its highest when we are not allowed to tell our stories in the way that we want to tell our stories. When we have to fit them into a specific mold that is not necessarily by us and for us, that trauma is higher than when it is when we are having community and we are holding space in order to tell the stories for us and to us. So that's my only addition to that.
Okay, great.
Right, Dr. Proctor is so eloquent. It's hard to follow.
I'm going to put on some headphones. We're having a little bit of feedback, so let me do that. And 1 second. There we go. Okay. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my next question is, to ensure the momentum that we see right now surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement and the conversations that people say they want to have, how do we, as artists of color, propel that momentum forward and keep the pressure applied?
I think it has to do with accountability. For example, right now in theaters, everybody wants to sign on to the Black Lives Matter movement and make a Black Lives Matter statement. Lots of people are doing that performative, social, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And we're like, so we can capitalize on that moment and go, great, you want to sign on. These are action items, and we're going to get your name in writing, and we're going to make you sign these things, since signing things is what we have, So let's make theater companies and performance venues. Let's make America actually sign on so that we can hold them accountable to the things said that they want to do. That's what I think that's one way.
Yeah. Okay. And to add to that, I think in terms of the part of your question about how do we keep that pressure applied, I think we honestly have to really evaluate how much we are going to continue to participate and be complicit when predominantly white institutions use us. And I use that phraseology purposefully, use us for our bodies, as opposed to actually bringing us in as collaborators and equal stakeholders at the table. So to really answer your question, I think, there's always the ways. I always talk to my students about this. The way to really get what it is that what you're asking for is to either make a statement with your attendance or make a statement with your dollars. Mm-hmm. And really that's how we keep the momentum applied. We say that we don't play by these rules that don't work for us and never have worked for us anymore.
Okay.
And I want to say that it's hard because as actors, We want to do the thing that we love. And we have to look at seasons and go, are you doing one white show this season? I'm sorry, are you doing one black show in a season of 8 shows? And because I think about it and I go, oftentimes white actors can do 7 of 8 shows in a season, and I can be in 1. And so I think about who's taking home a paycheck, who can feed their family, who can make a career as an actor. If the only time I get to work is in February, then that's a problem. You are not being equitable. That's, I think, those are the standards that we have to start to look at companies who would use us. Thank you for that word, Martine.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, and just to piggyback, excuse me, on that, you talked about making sure that they sign the paper. You say you want to do these things. We're going to put it in writing. You're going to sign your name to it. So to the broader arts community, for those artists, those arts organizations, universities, do you have more to say on that for those organizations and people that say, well, I want to be an ally, I want to help, but I don't know how? Besides signing of the paper, what else can they do, if anything?
First and foremost, listening.
Mm-hmm.
You beat me to it, Martine. That's where I was going to start.
But seriously, really, I think part of the problem is that there are a lot of people who want to tell people in the African American community how they are supposed to feel, how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to interact, as opposed to listening to what we desire and what we want. And so I think number one, just listening is the first step. If they're, and maybe sometimes, along with that listening, also, if we're going to keep the table metaphor, stepping back from the table and letting us actually talk about and program for us, as opposed to, having to then report back and say, this is the thing that we want, give control over, and back to making us equal stakeholders.
I think the other thing that we have to add to that is that part of listening is not becoming defensive. You might hear things that you don't like in these conversations. So if you listen and you begin to defend yourself, you're no longer listening. You have shut down. Learning to listen, to hear what is being said, we're not attacking. Oftentimes we as artists of color are not attacking you when we tell you what it feels like to sit at your table. Mm-hmm. And so not being defensive is a part of that listening. Really asking the questions about what can be done to make the table more equitable. Mm-hmm. That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. Just want to double check if there are any questions from the chat at all, or no? Okay. All right. Well, I want to make sure that I thank you both for being here and sharing your opinions with us. I really, really appreciate it. This is a trilogy. So there is one more story for The Girl in the Yellow Dress that will premiere same time next week, Thursday, 7:00. And that will be part 3 and the end of the trilogy. So I want to thank everybody that came out. Thank you, Chike. I know that we lost Malkia, but that's okay. That's okay. We're going to be right here, same time next week. Again, check our Facebook page, our YouTube page. We had trouble with the sound, but again, just go to our YouTube page immediately following the broadcast, and it will be there at 45 minutes after the hour. Okay. So thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you to my guests as well, Dr. Proctor, Dr. Green-Rogers. Thank you so much. Thank you.